Sometimes the hardest thing a person can do in a relationship is walk away, not because the love was fake, but because the effort became one-sided. Many people believe that when you leave someone, you must fight, argue, explain, and prove your pain. But the truth is, the strongest move you can make before walking away is something completely different. You see, people often remember how you left more than why you left. If you leave screaming, blaming, and trying to force someone to understand your worth, the message gets lost in the noise. But when you leave with dignity, calmness, and clarity, something powerful happens. Your silence becomes louder than any argument. This speech is about the one thing you should do before you walk away from someone who didn't value you the way they should have. Not to hurt them, not to play games, but to protect your self-respect and make sure the lesson stays with them long after you're gone. Because sometimes the most unforgettable goodbye is the one that is spoken without bitterness. When you decide to walk away from someone, the most important thing you can carry with you is self-respect. Many people misunderstand this moment. They believe that leaving a relationship means proving a point, winning an argument, or making the other person feel guilty for what they did. But the truth is, the way you walk away says more about your character than the reason you are leaving. Self-respect means understanding your worth even when someone else fails to recognize it. It means knowing that your value does not decrease just because another person did not appreciate what you offer. When a person loses their temper, begins shouting, or tries to tear the other person down before leaving, they may feel powerful in the moment, but in reality, they are giving away their dignity. You see, anger can make a situation louder, but it rarely makes it clearer. When emotions are running high, people stop listening. Instead of hearing the message, they focus on the tone, the accusations, and the drama. The real issue gets buried under emotional chaos. This is why walking away with calmness and composure can create a much stronger impact. Think about it for a moment. When someone expects a fight and instead receives silence and clarity, it forces them to reflect. When they expect you to beg, argue, or chase them for explanations, but you choose to simply step back with confidence, it changes the entire dynamic. That is the power of self-respect. Self-respect means you no longer need to convince someone of your value. It means you understand that the right people will recognize your effort without constant reminders. The wrong people, however, will keep testing your patience until you finally decide that enough is enough. Many people stay in unhealthy emotional situations because they are afraid of what walking away might mean. They worry about being misunderstood. They worry about being blamed. They worry about losing someone they once loved deeply. But here's the reality. Staying in a place where you constantly have to defend your worth slowly damages your confidence. Over time, you begin to question yourself. You begin to wonder if maybe you are asking for too much. Maybe you are expecting too much respect, too much honesty, too much care. But healthy relationships never make you feel like your basic emotional needs are unreasonable. Self-respect teaches you that love should not require you to shrink yourself just to keep someone comfortable. It should not require you to tolerate repeated disappointment just to avoid conflict. When you choose to walk away calmly, you are making a statement without raising your voice. You are saying, I know what I deserve, and I am no longer willing to stay where that standard is not met. This type of strength is quiet but powerful. People often underestimate the impact of a peaceful exit. They think silence means weakness. They think calmness means you no longer care. But in reality, calmness often means you have reached a deeper level of understanding. You have realized that arguments cannot force respect. You have realized that emotional pressure cannot manufacture genuine appreciation. And you have realized that protecting your peace is more important than proving a point. When someone walks away with anger, the story becomes about the conflict. When someone walks away with dignity, the story becomes about the loss. The person left behind eventually begins to notice the absence of what they once had. They remember the patience you showed. They remember the effort you gave. They remember the moments when you tried to make things work, and suddenly the silence speaks louder than any argument ever could. But it is important to understand that self-respect is not about punishing the other person. It is not about making them suffer or making them regret their actions. Self-respect is about protecting your emotional well-being. It is about recognizing when your energy is no longer being valued and choosing to redirect that energy toward a healthier future. Walking away with dignity also protects your own peace of mind. When you look back on the situation later, you will not feel embarrassed about how you behaved. You will not regret harsh words spoken in anger. You will know that you handled the situation with maturity and strength. That sense of inner peace is something no argument can ever provide. There's also another important lesson hidden in this moment. When you leave with self-respect, you set a standard for how people should treat you in the future. You teach others that you will not tolerate being taken for granted. People learn how to treat you based on what you allow. If someone sees that you continue to stay despite repeated disrespect, they begin to believe that your boundaries are flexible. But when they see that you are willing to walk away calmly and confidently, they realize that your standards are real. This does not mean the situation will suddenly change overnight. Sometimes people only recognize the value of something after it is gone. Sometimes growth and reflection happen long after the relationship ends. But your responsibility is not to control their realization. Your responsibility is to protect your own self-worth. Walking away with self-respect requires courage. It requires emotional discipline. It requires resisting the urge to prove your point or seek validation in the moment. Yet it is one of the strongest decisions a person can make. Because in the end, the goal is not to win an argument. The goal is to walk away with your dignity intact, your peace protected, and your confidence stronger than it was before. And when you do that, you carry something far more valuable than the relationship you left behind. You carry the quiet strength that comes from knowing your worth. One of the most important lessons in any relationship is learning when to stop over-explaining your value. Many people fall into the trap of believing that if they just communicate a little more, explain their feelings a little deeper, or prove their loyalty a little harder, the other person will finally understand how much they matter. At first, this effort comes from a good place. It comes from love, patience, and the desire to make things work. But when that effort becomes constant, exhausting, and one-sided, something important begins to change. When you repeatedly explain your worth to someone who continues to overlook it, you slowly start giving away your power. Instead of being appreciated naturally, your value begins to feel like something you must advertise. Instead of your actions speaking for themselves, you find yourself constantly reminding the other person of everything you have done, everything you have sacrificed, and everything you continue to offer. This creates a cycle that is emotionally draining. The more you try to convince someone of your importance, the more it can seem like you are seeking their approval. And where someone feels that you need their validation in order to feel worthy, they may begin to take your effort for granted. Not always intentionally, but human nature often works that way. When something valuable is always available without boundaries, people sometimes stop recognizing how rare it actually is. Healthy appreciation does not need to be forced. When someone truly respects you, they notice your effort without constant reminders. They pay attention to how you treat them. They recognize your patience, your support, and your presence in their life. You do not have to present a list of reasons explaining why you deserve to be treated well. Unfortunately, many people remain stuck in situations where they believe that understanding will eventually arrive if they just keep explaining themselves. They replay the same conversations again and again. They say things like, maybe you just don't understand how much this hurt me. Or maybe if I explain it one more time, things will finally change. But the truth is, understanding is not always the problem. Sometimes the issue is not a lack of explanation. Sometimes the issue is a lack of appreciation. When someone consistently fails to recognize your value, repeating your message does not always improve the situation. In fact, it can sometimes make you feel even more frustrated because you begin to realize that your words are not creating the change you hoped for. This is where an important shift in mindset must happen. Instead of focusing on making someone else understand your worth, you must begin focusing on whether you truly understand your own worth. Self-worth means knowing that your value does not depend on another person's recognition. It means understanding that you deserve respect, honesty, and emotional consistency without having to beg for those things. When you reach that level of awareness, something powerful happens. You stop chasing validation. You stop repeating the same explanations. You stop trying to prove your importance to someone who has already shown you how much attention they're willing to give. And when that shift happens, your behavior naturally changes. You become quieter but not weaker. You become calmer but not indifferent. You simply stop investing your energy where it is not being returned. This does not mean communication is unimportant. Healthy relationships absolutely require open conversations, honesty, and emotional transparency. But there is a difference between healthy communication and constant persuasion. Healthy communication happens when both people are willing to listen, understand, and grow. Constant persuasion happens when one person is always explaining while the other person continues to ignore or dismiss what is being said. The moment you recognize their difference, you begin to protect your energy more carefully. You realize that your worth is not something that should require constant defense. You realize that your actions, your loyalty, and your consistency should already demonstrate your value to the right person. And if someone repeatedly overlooks those things, the solution is not always to speak louder. Sometimes the solution is to step back. Distance has a unique way of revealing what words cannot. When you stop explaining, stop chasing, and stop trying to prove yourself, the other person is left with the reality of your absence. They no longer hear the reminders of what you bring to their life. Instead, they begin to experience the difference your presence once made. This is where reflection often begins. Suddenly, they may notice the silence where your encouragement once existed. They may notice the absence of the effort you once gave freely. They may begin to recognize the emotional support they had grown accustomed to receiving. But this reflection only happens when you stop trying to force it. Over-explaining delays that realization because it keeps the focus on convincing instead of experiencing. When you remove yourself from the cycle of constant explanation, you allow reality to speak for itself. At the same time, you also regain control of your own emotional balance. You are no longer measuring your worth by someone else's response. You are no longer waiting for someone else to validate your effort before you believe it has value. You begin to trust yourself more. You begin to understand that your time, your attention, and your love are meaningful resources that should not be spent endlessly trying to convince someone of your importance. And once you truly believe that, your standards rise naturally. You start choosing environments where your presence is appreciated rather than tolerated. You start investing your energy in people who recognize your effort without needing constant reminders. Most importantly, you begin to realize that the right person will never require you to repeatedly prove why you deserve respect, because genuine appreciation is not something that needs to be argued for. It is something that is recognized naturally by those who truly value what you bring into their life. One of the most powerful lessons a person can learn in relationships is that sometimes your absence speaks louder than any words you could ever say. Many people believe that when something goes wrong, the solution is always more conversation, more explanation, more emotional expression. They think that if they just talk long enough, explain clearly enough, or argue passionately enough, the other person will eventually understand their feelings. But the truth is, words can lose their impact when they are repeated too often without change. When someone constantly explains their feelings to a person who refuses to listen or refuses to adjust their behavior, the message slowly begins to lose its power. It becomes background noise. The same concerns are mentioned again and again, but the situation remains the same. Eventually, the person doing the explaining begins to feel unheard, while the person listening may stop taking those words seriously. This is where the idea of absence becomes important. Absence is not about playing games or trying to manipulate someone emotionally. It is about creating space for reality to become clear. When you step back from someone who has grown comfortable with your presence, they suddenly experience what life feels like without the effort, attention, and care you once provided. Think about how people often behave when something is always available. When something valuable is constantly within reach, people sometimes forget how important it is, not because they are intentionally ungrateful, but because familiarity can make even precious things feel ordinary. When your support, your patience, and your loyalty are always present, no matter how you are treated, the other person may begin to assume that those things will never disappear. They become part of the routine. They stop noticing the small sacrifices you make. They stop recognizing the emotional energy you invest in keeping the relationship alive. However, when that presence is suddenly removed, the routine changes. The absence creates a space where reflection can begin. Instead of hearing your voice reminding them of your value, they begin to feel the difference that your absence creates in their daily life. The conversations that used to happen are no longer there. The encouragement that once came naturally is gone. The emotional support they once relied on is suddenly missing. And in that silence, people often begin to see things more clearly. This is why absence can sometimes teach lessons that words never could. When you are constantly explaining your feelings, the other person may focus on defending themselves or avoiding responsibility. But when you step away quietly, the situation changes. There is no argument to distract them. There are no emotional debates to avoid. Instead, they are left alone with their own thoughts. That moment of reflection can be powerful. They may begin remembering the moments when you showed patience during difficult times. They may remember the times when you supported them without expecting anything in return. They may recall the loyalty you demonstrated even when things were not easy. Suddenly, the things they once overlooked begin to stand out. But here is an important truth. Absence should never be used as a strategy to make someone chase you or regret losing you. When absence is used as a game, it often creates confusion and emotional manipulation. True absence is different. True absence happens when you step back because you recognize that your presence is no longer being respected or valued. It comes from a place of self-awareness and emotional maturity. You are not leaving to punish someone. You are leaving because you understand that your energy deserves a healthier environment. When someone reaches that point, their silence carries a different kind of strength. It is not bitter silence. It is not angry silence. It is peaceful silence. Peaceful silence shows that you are no longer trying to control the outcome. You are no longer trying to force someone to see your perspective. Instead, you are focusing on protecting your own emotional balance. This kind of strength often surprises people. They may have expected arguments. They may have expected dramatic endings or emotional confrontations. But when none of that happens, it forces them to think more deeply about the situation. Why did this person leave so calmly? Why are they no longer trying to explain themselves? Why is the energy that once surrounded the relationship suddenly gone? Those questions can lead to self-reflection. Sometimes that reflection leads to growth. Sometimes it leads to regret. And sometimes it leads to a deeper understanding of what was lost. However, it is important to remember that your responsibility is not to control that process. Once you have stepped away with dignity, the rest of the journey belongs to them. Your focus must remain on your own growth. When you stop chasing someone's attention and begin investing that energy into your own development, something remarkable happens. You become stronger emotionally. You gain clarity about what you truly deserve. You begin creating a life that is not dependent on someone else's recognition. That transformation is far more valuable than any apology or realization the other person might eventually have. Because in the end, absence is not just about what the other person experienced. It is also about what you discover within yourself. You discover that your peace matters. You discover that your time and emotional energy are valuable. You discover that walking away from situations where you are not respected is not a loss. It is an act of self-preservation. And when you learn that lesson, your silence becomes powerful, not because it makes someone miss you, but because it represents a moment where you finally chose to protect your worth. One of the most important things to understand after walking away from a relationship is that the real purpose of leaving is growth. Many people mistakenly believe that the point of walking away is to make the other person regret losing them. They imagine the other person eventually realizing their mistake, feeling the loss, and wishing they had treated the relationship differently. While that kind of realization can sometimes happen, focusing your entire mindset on someone else's regret keeps your emotional energy tied to the past. True strength comes when walking away becomes a step toward personal development rather than a strategy for revenge. When a relationship ends or when you decide to leave a situation that no longer respects your worth, it creates an opportunity for deep reflection. It forces you to look at what you learned, what you tolerated, and what you want to do differently moving forward. Instead of carrying bitterness, you begin to carry wisdom. Growth begins the moment you stop asking, why didn't they value me? And start asking, what can this experience teach me? That shift in perspective changes everything. Every relationship, even the difficult ones, leaves behind lessons. Sometimes those lessons are about boundaries. Sometimes they are about communication. Sometimes they reveal areas where we ignored our own intuition just to keep someone in our life. When people are emotionally invested, they sometimes overlook early signs that something is not right. They dismiss uncomfortable feelings because they hope the situation will improve with time. They believe that patience and effort will eventually create the relationship they envision. But growth teaches you to recognize the difference between patience and self-sacrifice. Patience means giving someone space to grow while both people are still trying. Self-sacrifice happens when one person continues to give while the other person continues to take without change. Learning to recognize that difference is a powerful step forward. Walking away also gives you the chance to rebuild your confidence. When someone stays too long in a situation where they are not fully valued, their self-esteem can slowly begin to weaken. They start questioning themselves. They wonder if maybe they are expecting too much, asking too much, or wanting too much. But once you step away and begin focusing on your own growth, you start to see things more clearly. You realize that wanting respect, honesty, effort, and emotional consistency is not unreasonable. Those are the foundations of healthy relationships. As you grow, you begin to redefine your standards. You become more aware of what you are willing to accept and what you are not willing to tolerate anymore. You become more comfortable with the idea that protecting your peace is not selfish, it is necessary. This kind of growth also strengthens your independence. Instead of measuring your happiness based on someone else's attention or approval, you begin creating a life that feels fulfilling on its own. You invest more time into your goals, your passions, and the relationships that bring positivity into your life. You start building emotional stability that does not depend on another person's behavior. That stability becomes one of the most valuable things you can develop. Because when you are emotionally stable, you no longer feel desperate to keep people in your life who do not treat you well. You understand that being alone is far healthier than being in a relationship where you constantly feel undervalued. Another powerful result of growth is emotional maturity. Instead of carrying resentment toward the person you left, you begin to understand that not everyone is capable of giving you what you deserve. Some people are simply at a different stage in their personal development. They may not yet have the emotional awareness or responsibility needed to maintain a healthy relationship. Recognizing this does not excuse poor behavior, but it allows you to release unnecessary anger. Letting go of that anger frees your mind. It allows you to move forward without carrying emotional baggage that could affect your future relationships. When someone holds on to resentment, they often bring that pain into the next chapter of their life. They become guarded, distrustful, and afraid of opening up again. Growth helps prevent that cycle. Instead of closing your heart completely, you learn how to protect it wisely. You become more observant. You pay attention to actions rather than just words. You give people opportunities, but you also maintain clear boundaries. This balance creates healthier connections in the future. Another important aspect of growth after walking away is recognizing your own strength. Leaving a relationship, especially when strong emotions are involved, requires courage. It requires the willingness to face uncertainty instead of remaining in a situation that slowly drains your spirit. That decision alone proves something powerful about you. It proves that you value your well-being enough to make difficult choices. It proves that you are capable of choosing long-term peace over short-term comfort. And it proves that you are willing to learn from life rather than remain stuck in unhealthy patterns. As time passes, the pain of the situation begins to fade, but the lessons remain. Those lessons shape the way you approach relationships in the future. They make you wiser, more confident, and more emotionally aware. Eventually, you reach a point where the experience no longer feels like a loss. Instead, it feels like a turning point. You realize that walking away was not the end of something valuable. It was the beginning of a stronger version of yourself. The version of you that understands your work, protects your peace, and refuses to settle for anything less than genuine respect and care. And when you reach that stage of growth, something interesting happens. You stop worrying about whether the other person remembers you or regrets their actions, because your focus is no longer on the past. Your focus is on the life you are building, the person you are becoming, and the future that now reflects the strength you gained from choosing yourself.